Secretarial Audit, Compliance Management and Due Diligence. In this video, we'll understand the complete overview of what this subject is, and by end of this video, you'll get a complete picture of what this subject is in CS Professional. This subject is a proof of how much the company secretary profession has grown. Nobody would have imagined that there'll be a separate subject called Compliance Management, Secretarial Audit, Due Diligence even 10 years ago. That shows the proof of how CS profession has grown and how we have made a mark for ourselves in the corporate world. And the subject is to make sure that every student in the professional program is having the core skills of Secretarial Audit, Due Diligence and Compliance Management. In Companies Act, we have section 203, 204, 205. These three sections are like gold for company secretaries because KMP is 203 and company secretary is a key managerial personnel, and 204 is secretarial audit, a separate section for company secretaries. We always used to say that we don't have one particular section which talks about our core work, but 204 in Companies Act is giving us that power. And section 205 is the functions of a company secretary. Now, apart from these three sections, what is the important sections relating to this subject? There are many, but one thing which you should definitely remember is section 134, subsection 5, clause F, that is part of the director's responsibility statement. Talks about mainly the compliance management system, how a company, every company should have a compliance management system. These systems should be effective, they should be devised properly, you should monitor these systems, and all this happens because it is compulsory for every director to sign this in the director responsibility statement. And if a director wants to sign, he or she is very careful. And that is why our role of company secretary increases, because directors want us to ensure that they are complying with the law properly. Like this, there are many more interesting things in this subject, but first let us get a brief understanding of what each part is. Secretarial audit. That is the first part. It simply talks about checking the correctness of compliance. See, when we talk about compliance, how do we know whether somebody has complied properly or not? We need to check. That is the traditional concept of audit. So we know about financial audit, statutory audit, which a chartered accountant does, but there was nothing similar which a company secretary used to do. And how we have carved out a new area is really something very proud all of us should be. And this shows how now even secretarial audit is as serious, if not more serious in some companies when it comes to auditing the documents of the company, especially the secretarial documents and the corporate law documents. This secretarial audit should be done from an outsider. It can't be somebody who is within the company. See, if I come and ask you and I ask your parents, is your daughter good? Is your son good? Obviously, they'll say good things about you. But if I ask your teachers or neighbors or somebody in your school or college, they'll give a right picture. You need an outsider because the insider is having a bias, and that is the natural love and affection. That is the reason why even the audit should be an external person who is doing it, and that is the practicing company secretary. Then this subject is talking about governance. So when we say governance, it is compliance management system and ensuring that there is a proper compliance for every company. And when we talk about compliance, see, the wider concept is governance. Globally, the concept of governance is growing as we speak, and compliance is one subset of the concept of governance. Even if you see recently, there's been a lot of talk, especially in the COVID, about ESG. ESG is environment, social and governance. How companies should be more responsible towards environment, how companies should meet net zero, that is to reduce the pollution, to reduce the use of fossil fuels, and how we can have a more green planet which is good for humanity. So this is what is the general concept of ESG. But what is important for us is in ESG, G is about governance. And when we talk about governance, it is the corporate laws, and in India especially, ESG is gaining a lot of traction, and company secretaries are perfectly poised to take this opportunity because environment, social, yes, you have other experts to do about it, but governance is back to company secretary. How does the board function? How does the board meetings happen? Are the board meetings within the ethical standards, within the legal standards? Are we complying with the law? So governance is a big concept, and that is why this subject becomes very important. Next is due diligence. So very briefly first, due diligence. So due diligence is nothing but a preventive tool. See, we have always heard in school one proverb in English, that is, prevention is better than cure, right? So to say that instead of going and curing a disease, better to prevent it, right? Make sure you're healthy, make sure you eat hygienic food, these kind of things. Same way, even in due diligence, if anybody is getting into a transaction, a classic example is a foreign company or a foreign investor wants to invest money into India. Foreign direct investment in simple. So if you're investing money, they want to check whether everything is right in that company. So let us say there are a lot of startups in India, and now India has more than 100 unicorns. So each time they're putting in money into an Indian company, they want to check whether everything is right. Not only about the legal aspects, but about the business, about the founders, about their background. So this is all what we call as the due diligence process, where prevention. So they're preempting everything and they're checking everything whether it is correct before they get into a transaction. And our role of a company secretary comes for the secretarial due diligence, the legal due diligence, and this is a very, very big field. So let us understand that due diligence will help many transactions to go smoothly, and there are lesser fights or lesser misunderstanding if due diligence is done properly. In simple, due diligence is an investigative process. You're investigating whether all the processes are correct, all the documents are correct, whether the company complied with everything, and this investigative process is what we study. So this is a very, very brief understanding of what is secretarial audit, what is compliance management, and what is due diligence. We'll try to understand more about this as we go further in this video. Why do we have this subject? After we understood a very brief of each of the concepts of due diligence, secretarial audit, compliance management, why do we have this subject, sir? Why do we have this? This is one common question, so you should know this. Please understand, globally governance is gaining lot of traction and lot of importance. If you see, not just in India, in fact in the Western countries, corporate scams are only growing. Corporate scams are getting more complex, and some of the managing directors, some of the founders are getting greedy, and they're cheating the public, they're cheating the government, and they're cheating the shareholders. And these corporate frauds and scams are becoming multinational. It is not just limited to one particular country. Whatever happens in one country, other countries are getting affected. We all saw in 2008, the financial crisis mainly happened in US. But since US had so many business interests across the world, lot of countries suffered. Even in India, to a certain extent, we did face the financial crisis or the meltdown. There was a big problem with respect to recession. So when we look at it, when there is a big corporate scam or a fraud in a big multinational corporation, which is nowadays many companies are bigger than countries, like Apple, the money which they have, even many countries don't have. So that is why it becomes very important that we know how to control these scams, and these scams are getting more complex and complicated. And what is the only way to tackle this? You can't expect that these people who are doing scam are going to get some kind of nirvana, and they're going to say that, okay, we are not going to do this again, and they get some realization. No, that is not going to happen. The only way is law. Law is the only way where we can stop this, catch them, and to make it more strict and difficult for them to do the scams. You cannot have a situation where human greed will go away and people will not cheat. They will be there, and the only way is the laws and the governance and ensuring that everything is in place. So that is why, as a company secretary, our ICSI has a great vision that company secretaries should be the go-to professionals when it comes to governance. And that is the reason we have an entire subject about secretarial audit, due diligence, and compliance management. Please understand the global nature of this subject. A governance aspect is not just for one company. It is for the entire corporate world, in the entire globe, and all the actions make a big difference. And we should ensure that we connect all the dots. And the board of directors are mainly responsible for governance in a company, and company secretary directly reports to the board. So our role becomes extremely important and responsible, and it is important that we do our role properly, and we can do that when we understand the basic principles in a subject like this. Okay, fine, sir. What is the expectation of ICSI? This is the next question. What is ICSI expecting? What are the objectives of ICSI? When it comes to part A, ICSI wants every student to have expert knowledge in making sure they know how to do compliance, they know how to do the reports like search report, status report, and ensuring that all the compliances are taken care of. And part B is more about secretarial audit. See, financial audit, we all know how important it was, but secretarial audit has become even more important with the way ICSI has shown its strength and knowledge and how the secretarial audit can actually catch many frauds. So in part B, the objective of ICSI is to ensure that every student is an expert in secretarial audit and due diligence, because today any company which is getting in investment, due diligence has to happen. I can speak for myself, whether my firm AAA & Co, where I'm a partner, or some of my friends and my seniors, we are getting lot of due diligence works which was not happening even 6 to 7 years ago. That is because lot of investments are happening in India, and if more investments are there, you need more professionals like company secretaries to ensure there is proper due diligence before people put in their money. And that is the reason why this subject talks about the objective of CS student being expert in due diligence. Now let us get to the syllabus of this subject. What is there in the syllabus? The first part is 40 marks, which is compliance management. And the second part, which is about secretarial audit due diligence, it is for 60 marks. ICSI wants CS, a company secretary, to be the go-to professional. CS should be the person which a company should go to. It is not that they should not go to others, but ICSI is telling company secretary is best equipped with the knowledge to carry out these activities of secretarial audit, due diligence, and compliance management. That is the reason. So in the syllabus also, they've designed it in such a way. So the first part is compliance management. Let us just go into the syllabus. As you can see, compliance management has 40 marks. That there we are having compliance framework, compliances, documentation and maintenance of records, search and status report, KYC, signing and certification. Then we have signing and certification with respect to various documents, segment-wise role of company secretary. So this is broadly the part A syllabus. So in part A, first we have the compliance framework, or I can also call it as the compliance universe. Like what all is there part of compliance? What all should we know? What are the basic frameworks? This is covered in the first lesson. The second lesson talks about the compliances. So here we have things like what are the different areas, what is the area-wise compliance, what is the activity-wise compliance, what is the sector-wise compliance, what is the industry-specific compliance. That is, let us say you have a pharmaceutical company, so you have special laws which is relating to the pharma sector. So how do we comply with that? Banking companies, we have the Banking Regulation Act, Reserve Bank of India Act. So those things come into picture. Next, we talk about documentation and maintenance of records. So here you have concepts like what are the different ways you can maintain documents, what is the virtual way you can maintain, what is the physical way. These are all very, very relevant. You may feel, sir, how do we study this? All this is so practical. Yes, many things in this subject you'll understand only when you work. But first you should know the basics and what is the overall framework, and that is what we study over here. What you are feeling is right. Many things in this subject you'll understand only when you actually start working. But to start working, you should know basics, you should know the framework, and that is what we study. Then we have search and status report. Search and status report talks about when should we need this search report, when do we need this status report, because even today, recently this happened, one of our client wanted to purchase a land from another company. And it is a pure real estate transaction, you may feel. But the client ensured that they did a search report. They asked us, please give us a search report about this company. Do they have some other contracts? Please read their entire documents which is filed with Ministry of Corporate Affairs. See their balance sheet. Tell us if there is something wrong. Because only buying a land just by seeing the real estate records and the land records is not sufficient today, because it's a very big transaction of more than 100 crores. So we did the search report for them. So this is just one example of the different situations where we need a search report. It is not only when a company is taking a loan from a bank that a bank asks you a search report. That is the traditional understanding. Today, not just banks, but everybody needs search and status report. There are more than 100 different scenarios where you need this search and status report. And the best person to do this is company secretary. How do we do this? And what are the steps involved? Where do we find the documents? How do we give the report is what we study in this chapter. Next, we study about KYC, know your customer. So know your customer is important in every aspect today, especially when the identity of people is so important. And there is a lot of scope for fraud, etc. That is why this chapter talks about what is the KYC which companies should take, what is the KYC which company secretaries in practice should give before they are appointed, what is the KYC directors should give, how do we catch any director who is not giving KYC. All these kind of things is there in this chapter. Next, we study about signing and certification. What is pre-certification? A person is going to check the correctness of the document and certify it, and that person is practicing company secretary when it comes to company law records. So why is the pre-certification there? To lessen the burden of government. So government is telling we trust company secretaries, you check the documents and tell us whether it is correct or not. If a company secretary in practice does a mistake, then he or she is liable for punishment and can even be sent to jail if they don't do the job properly. So our responsibility is so high and the government trusts us in pre-certification. That is what we study here. What are the different areas in which we do the certification? It could be annual return, it could be certification of other compliances, it could be the quarterly reports. There are different things for listed companies, private companies, public companies. All this is what we study. Next, lesson 7 is about the role of company secretary and how he or she should perform his or her duties. So what are the various industries in which a company secretary can perform duties? Banking industry, tourism, telecommunications, cement, gems, automobile, aviation, biotechnology, chemicals. The list is endless. All these things is what we study, and the scope, which is so wide. Our scope is extremely wide, and this chapter gives you a perfect proof that why our profession is growing so much and our scope is so high, and it's a very interesting chapter. Next, we come to part B. Part B broadly is about audit, secretarial audit. See, this is something which you don't understand the bird's eye view. This video is about bird's eye view. See, earlier we used to say only a chartered accountant does audit. That is no more true. In fact, secretarial audit is so important that in some companies, it takes more time to do secretarial audit than the financial audit. I was talking to one of a very senior company secretary, and he told me there was a company where he took up the secretarial audit and his fees was more than the chartered accountant's fees for the financial audit. And the company's board of directors, they were also new to this. They said, why is your fees more than this? This takes more time. But that was a company which had got more than 5 to 6 rounds of foreign investment. There was change in directors. There was a dispute in the company. There were some court cases. So the work for the secretarial auditor was very, very wide. And it took more time and more complex nature of expertise which was required for secretarial audit. And that is when the board of directors understood that yes, this fees is higher because there was more work than even financial audit. So this is the kind of change and transformation which is happening in the corporate world when it comes to secretarial audit. And this entire part B is about audit and secretarial audit. And see, as a chartered accountant, you learn about audit right from the principles. But a company secretary just learns what is secretarial audit in the executive level. So in the CS professional level, we go into the fundamentals of auditing. What is audit? What is quality check? How do you ensure that you're having a uniformity while auditing? So all these things is what you cover. And the other concepts which we do is internal audit and the performance audit, the audit engagement. How do we take up a work? The audit principles and techniques. Why should we follow the uniformity in the auditing process? How do we maintain documentation? Because once you audit, a question can come to you even after 5 years. You should have the documentation to prove that you did the right process of auditing, and you should be very, very honest as a company secretary. How do you form an opinion? Because opinion is very subjective. Each person has different opinion. So how do you form that opinion? How do you report that opinion is what we study, and this is extremely good because the scope of secretarial audit and audit by company secretaries is increasing day by day, and this is the best part. Quality review. How do you ensure that everybody is auditing properly? So is there an external person who does the quality review of the audit? And most importantly, we study about the ethics. Ethics in auditing is important. We all know how the chartered accountants in PwC case of Satyam were not ethical? So this is a very big question, and why ethics is important. What is ethics? How do we ensure we have a right ethical practices is the last part of this particular subject. So all this shows that this subject is a proof that company secretary profession is growing, our opportunities are greater, and especially in the last few years, because there is huge foreign direct investment, the role of CS in compliance management, in due diligence happens before a transaction. So before anyone puts in the money, they want to check if everything is correct. Suppose you want to buy a land, of course you'll check the land records, right? What are you doing is a due diligence. Same way you're doing the due diligence of company, right? That is the scope which is increasing. Secretarial audit is compulsory for larger companies, which the Companies Act has brought in. So this subject is highly specialized, and if you are perfect in this subject, you will be in demand your entire life. Next, how do you prepare for this subject and how to present answers in the exam? See, first thing you should understand is please put yourself in the shoes of the director, or put yourself in the shoes of the company secretary or the practicing company secretary. When you put yourself, when you think and you imagine that you're in that situation, you'll be able to appreciate the subject a little better. So what you should do is please read business newspapers relating to this news. If you read any business newspaper, Economics Times, Business Standard, Financial Express, anything, and most of these newspapers you can even get it online for free. If you want, you can take a physical copy, but even online is good enough. When you read these newspapers, you get news about different due diligence, different transactions, how a due diligence by a certain company did not go well, right? Then you will know about the corporate frauds which are happening. Like recently we had the Yes Bank, Rana Kapoor, which is becoming a very big fiasco. So all these kind of things you need to read, and ensure that at least 5 real case studies you should write in the exam. When you present an exam, write at least minimum 5 case studies. It could be whatever you read in the paper relating to Zomato or startups taking over another startup, or foreign direct investment, how it is happening, or a scam like Yes Bank. So read about this. Put this in the answer, you will get marks, because you should write what is relevant and practical, not just what is the law. Of course you should know the law, that is your first job, but also write the current affairs relating to the law, connect the law with the current affairs. That is only application of your mind, and that is what you should present in your answers. See, due diligence is a very, very important thing. When you write your answers, please try to connect it. See, a due diligence can be make or break. Many times investors don't put money into a company because the due diligence is not up to their satisfaction. I'll give you one example. There was a company which was one of our clients, and they're doing very good work in a media related startup, and they were ready to get about 8 crores of funding. Everything was ready with the product business, but when they came and they did the due diligence, they saw that this company has not even done share certificates. They didn't even pay stamp duty on share certificates, which was completely atrocious, and they had no regard to the law. And you won't believe, the investor said that I am not going to invest in your company because your product and business may be great, but if you have not even complied a simple thing like share certificate, and I become your partner, because once you invest you become their partner, I'm not going to be comfortable. And that was a deal breaker. That means they said we don't want to invest. So that is how important it is. And this subject, if you are an expert, you will always be in demand. Due diligence or compliance management or secretarial audit are something which is increasing every day, and ICSA wants you to be an expert, and this subject is all about that. This subject is future. Secretarial audit, due diligence and compliance management. There is a huge scope. Ensure that you become perfect. Yes, whatever you are going to study, you'll have a different experience when you start working, but first you should know the basics and fundamentals. Ensure that you're perfect in this subject, and if you want any help, if you want online classes, if you want any support relating to the subject, please get in touch with Ekcel Academy. You can see the number on the screen. We are always there, happy to help you. And for more such videos, subscribe to us. Please give a like to this video, share it with whoever who may need this video. And this Birdseye View series gives you all the subjects. So please go to our playlist. We have Birdseye View of all subjects of CS Professional. It will give you a perfect start to start preparing for CS Professional. And if you're already in Professional, it gives you clarity of what this subject, why is it, how should we present the answers. Thank you and all the best to you.